On this week's episode of the Stay at Home Nurse Podcast, we have a special treat for you. I have a special guest, Sarah Gaines, the six-figure travel nurse. My goal with this podcast is always to inspire and equip you to live the life of your dreams using your nursing credentials, and that is exactly what Sarah is doing. You are going to find this episode so inspiring. Whether or not you plan on traveling, you don't want to miss it. Welcome to the Stay at Home Nurse Podcast. I'm your host, Deanna Cooper Gillingham. For over 25 years, I've strived to use my nurse credentials to find work that fit my lifestyle. Whether it was raising my 4 children and 3 fur babies, traveling the world, or moving to Mexico and living on the Caribbean Sea. Sometimes I succeeded and sometimes I failed, but I always learned from the experience. Now, I want to help you by sharing what worked and what didn't work. There are so many opportunities out there for nurses today. The Stay at Home Nurse Podcast will inspire and equip you to have a nursing career that is meaningful and supports your lifestyle. Now let's get started. Hello, today we have a special guest for you, Sarah Gaines. Sarah is the six-figure travel nurse, and we're going to learn a little bit more about that. Hi, Sarah. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
We are so pleased to have you. We want to hear all about this six-figure travel nurse. But first, let's hear how you got started. Tell us what you do. What kind of a nurse are you?
So I am a labor and delivery nurse. I've been in labor and delivery for a little over 8 years, and I have been a travel nurse actually for a majority of my career. I've been a travel nurse longer than I ever was a staff nurse, which is kind of funny to me now at this point.
Oh, that is funny. Yeah, I like that. So how did you start your nursing career? Did you go straight into labor and delivery?
I actually didn't. I took the scenic route because I was kind of terrified of labor and delivery, to be honest with you. It was a fast-paced, high acuity unit. And so I started off on mother baby. And to be completely honest with you, I didn't like it too much. The hospital I started at was very high acuity, very busy. The nurse patient ratio was high, but I'm thankful for the experience that I got because we took care of moms, we took care of babies, we took care of med surge overflow. So it built a good foundation and it eventually built my confidence. So I started in mother baby and then I floated to the nursery when there was a need for nursery. And then they had a need for the baby catcher in labor and delivery. And I was like, well, I do nursery. I'm comfortable with babies, so I'll go over there. And so I was a baby catcher for like a year. And then the labor and delivery nurses were like, okay, Sarah, come on over. You know you want to do it. So I eventually worked up the courage and ended up in labor and delivery. But it was definitely a blessing in disguise that I took the scenic route because it ultimately made me so much more marketable as a travel nurse because since I can float to antepartum, postpartum nursery or labor and delivery, those are more job opportunities for me when I'm applying. So it worked out.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. So how did you get started with the travel nursing? Was that something that you always had on the radar, or how did you get started with that?
To be honest with you, I never, ever thought I was going to be a travel nurse. I had kind of heard of travel nursing before. My dad had mentioned it to me. My dad was an entrepreneur himself, and he was the world traveler, and he did this and he did that, and he mentioned it to me, and I thought he was crazy. I was like, no, travel nursing, that sounds risky. I'm scared of the unknown, whatever. But the straw that kind of broke the camel's back was he was diagnosed with cancer, and I ended up being his hospice nurse. So I took care of him until the day he passed away. And very shortly after he passed away, I got a call from my job, and it was my manager saying like, hey, we need you at work. And I was like, well, can I please just have a few more days off? Because my dad just passed away and I just really don't know if I am strong enough to make it to work, to be honest with you. And the manager was just like, no, we're short staffed. We need you here on Monday. So my dad's funeral was on Sunday and I got up and went to work on Monday.
Wow.
And yeah. So, and honestly, I thought I was going to be okay. I was like, okay, it's fine. I'm okay. But of course, in labor and delivery, I walk into my patient's room and she's delivering her first baby, and everything went smoothly until she called her dad into the room to welcome his first grandchild. And I just
Okay, we're
lost
both
it.
going to start crying now.
I just lost it. I was on the floor. I was crying. I was just like, it just hit me, like me and my dad are never going to share this moment. He's never going to see me get married. He's never going to see me have my kids. He's never going to meet his grandchildren. It just all came crumbling down at once. And so I was crying, and my coworkers were all surrounding me and telling me, oh my gosh, Sarah, it's going to be okay. I'm so sorry. And then I feel my manager's hand on my shoulder, and she says, Sarah, you're making a scene. I need you to get up. There's another patient waiting. So go ahead and get this one cleaned up, because we have another patient that we're going to bring up. You need to transfer her out.
Wow.
And I was just shocked. And at that point, I knew I was done with that place, and I was ready to go, and I wanted to quit. But unfortunately, like most people, I couldn't just walk away from that job. I had a lot of financial obligations, especially with my mother being newly widowed. I needed to help out. So I had to do exactly what she said. So I got up and took care of my patient and got the next patient. But later on that day, I was eating lunch in the break room. And of course, I put my resume on every single job website that I could find, like Indeed, Monster. I'm like, I got to get out of here. So I'm checking my emails, like, did anyone email me back? Do I have any job offers? And my phone rings, and it's this random recruiter. And the recruiter's like, hey, do you want to jump into travel nursing? And I was so annoyed and so emotional. And I was like, no, I don't want to jump into travel nursing. I'm like, this is the worst day ever. I hate my job. My dad just passed away. I need a way to get out of here. Like, I can't go traveling the world and having a good time right now. Like, that's not for me. And the recruiter was like, well, wait a minute, Sarah. You said that you wanted a job to make more money to help out financially. You said that you wanted to be closer to your mother. She's over 200 miles away. Why don't you pick up a travel nursing assignment over there? There's actually a hospital that's 10 minutes from your mom's house. It's making more money, and it's day shift. And I was like, oh, really?
Are you for real?
I was like, exactly. Are you for real? So you want to know what I did?
What did you do?
I hung up because I thought it was a scam. I was like, this is a scam. That's not true. I hung up. I thought the recruiter was crazy. So I hang up on the recruiter, and I go back eating my lunch, and I'm scrolling through my emails, on Indeed and stuff. And then I run into an email that my dad had sent me literally a couple days before he passed away. And it was actually an email he forwarded for a job position for travel nursing. And it was the exact same position that recruiter had just mentioned to me.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my God, like, that's a sign. So I immediately, before my lunch break is over, I call the recruiter. I'm like, hey, go ahead and submit me. I definitely want the job. And the recruiter was like, what? You changed your mind? I'm like, I know. It's
Did
crazy,
they ask, are you the same girl that just hung up on me?
I know. I was like, just submit me. Like, I'm ready. So before my lunch break was over, everything was submitted and good to go. And the recruiter said, okay, you can expect a phone call from the manager within the next couple of days. So turn your phone notifications on. I'm like, okay, cool. And then so I go about my day, and a couple hours later, the manager calls me. So I run into the supply room and did my first travel nurse interview in the supply room, and she ended up offering me the job. So I accepted. My recruiter sent over the contract. I signed my contract. Before my shift was over, I had typed up my 2 weeks notice and gave it to that same manager that told me I was making a scene.
Wow. That's an amazing story on so many levels. So first of all, it's sad that your manager did that. I mean, first of all, made you go back to work the day after, and even giving the benefit of the doubt and her thinking, well, maybe being at work would help you to, recover faster, which I don't think that a day later is. But even that, to the fact that when you didn't you weren't able to handle it. She just kind of said, shake it off and get back in there. I mean, this is the death of your father. It's not like you stubbed your toe. There's a big difference here. But what impresses me about you is you took action. I mean, you just didn't go and just cry on your friend's shoulders and your coworkers' shoulders and say, woe is me, and isn't she mean? You were like, okay, that's it. I'm out of here. And like on your lunch break, you took action. And by the end of the shift, you had another job. That is incredible. That speaks a lot about you, Sarah. And your father raised you well. Let me just say that. I'm sure he was very proud of you. I'm sure he was very proud of you at that moment.
Thank you. I always tell people that, I always encourage people to jump into travel nursing, to take the leap despite the fear, because it definitely is like a scary and unknown thing. And a lot of people have those fears, but I'm like, you know what, take the leap, because it has changed my life so much. But I don't think I really took the leap into travel nursing. I joke around. I'm like, no, my dad like pushed me off a cliff. My dad was like, go, here's your sign. Get out of there.
Wow.
And I needed that though. I needed that. And it was so unfortunate that that situation happened, but I'm grateful for how the events happened, because if all of that wouldn't have happened to me in the same day, if I wouldn't have been treated that way, if the manager wouldn't have said those things to me, I don't know if I ever would have been brave enough to take the leap. I think I would have continued to make excuses. Like I had been unhappy at my job for a long time. I had been, burnt out from mandatory overtime. I was working night shifts, so I was freaking exhausted. I was dealing with a very hostile work environment, to say the least. Obviously, what my manager said was just one of the many things that went on at that place. And I just felt very undervalued and underappreciated. I was not happy, but at the end of the day, I wasn't uncomfortable enough to leave. I wanted to stay in my comfort zone. And I feel like so many people, especially nurses, would rather be unhappy and comfortable at their job than jump out of their comfort zone to really gain the freedom, the autonomy, and the job satisfaction that every nurse deserves.
Absolutely. And it's almost, they'd rather have the devil that they know than the devil that they don't know. But
yes,
sometimes I don't know about you, but I have found, I think one of the reasons travel nursing always appealed to me is that there's the honeymoon phase when you start a new job. And that honeymoon phase is when you go in and everybody loves you because they're like, oh, you're saving us from this overtime that we've been doing. And we're so glad we got a new person on board. And you don't know the politics and you don't know who doesn't get along with who and who doesn't talk to who. And then after a while that you start to, no matter how good you are at trying not to, you end up getting pulled into it. But when you're a travel nurse, you just go on to your next assignment. You never really get fully pulled into that. So that's probably one of the things that always attracted me to it. Was I loved starting a new job and just being totally naive to all the little things that were going on the floor that I didn't really need to know to get my job done. But going back though, it says a lot about you, because I think the same thing has happened to many nurses, but they just complain about it. They grumble about it, but they don't actually do anything about it. And you did something about it. You were like, I'm not going to take this anymore. I deserve better. And whether or not this is the right choice, I'm going to make this choice and at least do something. I'm taking an action and trying to find better. And if it's not, I'll just keep trying until I find it.
yes.
So my question is, when you got there, was it what you were looking for? Was it what you expected when you got to that first travel assignment?
Okay, this is a good question because, I'm going to tell you both sides of it. So when I initially started my first assignment, it was way better than I could have ever imagined.
Wow.
It was
I wasn't
way
expecting
better.
that. I was expecting you to say, oh my gosh. I was like, what did I do?
Oh, it was way better. And the crazy part is when I turned in that 2 weeks notice to that manager, I was young too. I was only 24. And that manager just really she told me, you're going to come running back. And when you do, there's not going to be day shift available. You better think about this twice. You're not ready to be a travel nurse. You think you have enough experience? No, you're not ready. And so all of that stuff was in my head. And I still was like, no, I'm going to do it. But when I got there, I was pleasantly surprised. And I think a big part of it was I came from a level 1, high volume, high acuity facility. And I went to a facility that had about half the volume and not as high as acuity when it comes to patients. So it just wasn't as over. And they actually followed like nurse patient ratios. So when I
That's
was
always nice when you find that, isn't it?
it was like I was so used to things being terrible, like always being understaffed. So when I got to this new travel nursing assignment, their idea of understaffed was not what I was used to. It was easy to me. I was like, oh, this is so easy. I'm getting paid more money. I'm working day shift. Like, this is awesome. And they were so welcoming. So yeah, my first assignment was actually better than I could have ever imagined. And I was actually a lot more prepared than I could have ever imagined. But so there was that side of it. And I actually ended up staying there for like a year. That's how much I loved it. So there's that side of it. But then the other side of it was just travel nursing in general. That's what was unexpected for me. I spent so much time worrying about, oh my gosh, this first assignment, I'm going to be overwhelmed. I'm not going to make friends. I'm not going to know what to do. That's not what happened to me. What happened to me was about 6 months into my assignment, I found out there was nurses making $500 more a week than me to do the same job. And I was like, wait, what? Wait, what?
So they're doing the
And
same thing as you, doing the same work.
exact same thing. And keep in mind, like, this was after working there for several months. So they literally made like $15,000 more than me over those several months that I worked there.
Wow, that's a lot of money. Like 500 a week. That's
yes.
2,000 a month.
Yes. And so I was shook. That's when I realized, wait a minute, I don't know. I thought it was just so easy to jump into travel nursing and become a travel nurse. Well, technically it is. You can talk to a recruiter, talk to a company, get a recruiter and pick an assignment. You can definitely do that. But then once I was in it, I realized, like, wait a minute. I got to be smarter about the company I choose and the recruiter I choose. And I have to review my offer, understand my offer, understand how to negotiate so I don't end up in this position. And yeah, so that assignment was the first of many, many mistakes that I made. I remember calling them, this is hilarious thinking back on it. I remember the other nurse telling me, yeah, I'm making, this much money, whatever. And I called my recruiter and I'm like, hey, why are all these other nurses making more money than me? I feel like I deserve more money. And you know what my recruiter said? Yes, you can have more money.
What?
And so it's like, part of me was happy that I got more money, but the other part of me was livid. I'm like, so you've just been holding back this extra money from me this whole time? So it made me like hate my recruiter. And then I was stuck with them, right? Because I signed a contract and I was like, oh my gosh. So then I felt bamboozled and then I just didn't trust my recruiter. And then it was like a domino effect. It started to make me question everything. Did I choose the right company? Did I choose the right recruiter? How am I supposed to find a recruiter I trust when there's hundreds of companies and thousands of recruiters and they all sound really nice? Like, and of course, as an experienced travel nurse, newsflash, if anyone is watching this and listening to this and wants to be a travel nurse, like, they're all nice. It's their job to be nice. And so I just felt so bamboozled. So that was my first taste of mistakes that just cost me time, money, and frustration, which is what eventually led to me creating the travel nurse course. Because when I talked to other travel nurses, they were like, yeah, girl, that always happens. You get screwed on your first contract, your first couple contracts. You may lose some money. Your housing may fall through. Your company is probably going to backstab you a couple times before you realize which companies to work with. And I'm like, why is that the standard? Like, why is that the standard? Why is that acceptable? Why is there no? And then when I was trying to research and learn about travel nursing, there was so much information all over the place. A lot of it was conflicting information. A lot of it was biased information, which at the time I not know. But now as an experienced travel nurse, I know that a lot of the main travel nursing websites are actually like sponsored by particular companies. So you're thinking you're getting good information, but it's really biased. So it was hard. It was very hard. I struggled my first couple years as a travel nurse, just kind of learning through trial and error, which I think was very surprising for me. I was so worried about getting a quote unquote bad assignment. I've had way more good assignments than bad ones. I definitely had some bad ones. It's impossible to avoid that. But I've had way more good experiences than bad when it comes to assignments. But learning the ins and outs in the industry, those are the bad experiences that I've had.
So I want to kind of touch on that again. So you saw this problem. You were like, okay, the problem is I lost out on thousands of dollars, over $10,000. That's a lot of money, 5 figures we're talking. And you said, kind of like I did when I wrote my book, nobody else should have to do this. There should be an easier way. Why isn't it? And I 100% agree. I kind of did a little research on this, and I was looking at information for travel nurses. All the information that you find out there, if you Google it, is written by a company that does travel nursing. So when you say, who's the best company to work for? Well, guess who you're going to find? Of course, they're going to say that they are, because they're hiring somebody to write that story that is going to say, here's the 5 best, and this is definitely number 1, and this is why. So it's really hard to find unbiased information out there. If you do find it, it's so hidden and so buried, by that time you don't even know that that's actually the legitimate one, because you've seen so many that were biased and not necessarily the best information. On top of that, how do you know who to trust? Like, a lot of people doing travel nursing don't actually know somebody who's already done it. And even if you do, how do you know that they're getting the best assignment? And I guess it's one of those things where if you didn't, after you've done it for a while, you kind of make some friends that have done it and you can kind of figure it out. But if you're looking to do it for the first time, you have no connections. How do you know where to start? So you Google it like we do everything else. And then you find all this misinformation. And so you decided that you were going to solve that problem. So how did you decide to do that?
Yes, I definitely decided that it was a huge problem that needed to be solved, because you're right. You can definitely get lost in the Google rabbit hole. And what's unfortunate about that is, number one, it's hard to find good, relevant, accurate, unbiased information. And like you just mentioned, even when you do find it, if you don't have the knowledge and insight and experience in the industry, it's hard to decipher between what's good and what's bad information. There's information I see on the web all the time as an experienced travel nurse, and I'm like, oh, that's crap. Like, that's terrible advice. But unfortunately, when I was a newer travel nurse, and not even newer, when I was a naive travel nurse, because there's some travel nurses who've been traveling for 10 years, but they're still naive when it comes to negotiating, looking at their offer, choosing companies, choosing recruiters. They're still naive to that thing. It makes it very hard to decipher between the good and bad information. So I basically saw that gap and decided to fill it in with the travel nurse course. So the travel nurse course is a comprehensive online program with pre-recorded lessons, so busy nurses can watch them between their busy schedule. And they're all pre-recorded lessons that take you from everything you should know before you jump into travel nursing to how to choose an assignment, how to choose a company, how to choose a recruiter, what you should look at in your contract, red flags you should avoid, how to find housing without the hassle, all of that stuff. But it's not just information. It is insider tips that you only gain from experience in the industry, and valuable strategies that I've used to get my contracts and advance my career as a travel nurse. And so it allows you, if you are a newer travel nurse, to kind of skip those couple years of learning through trial and error. I've made all those mistakes, and they're in the travel nurse course. So you're able to learn from my mistakes and go straight to thriving as a 6-figure travel nurse instead of struggling and learning through trial and error. So that's one part of the course. But the second part of the course, which honestly I think is one of the most valuable parts, is the community of nurses that you get when you enroll in the travel nurse course. Because like you mentioned, when a lot of people jump into travel nursing and they don't know another travel nurse. And that was me. I didn't know another travel nurse, and I craved just other nurses who were going through the same thing as me, other nurses who were like in the trenches with me and feeling my scary emotions, whether I was scared, anxious, excited, whatever it may be. I craved that community. And I also craved like a safe place to ask questions. I didn't want to feel stupid or be belittled in any type of way. So the travel nurse course community is just a safe place for like-minded nurses that are all doing the same thing as you. And I love it because they all uplift each other and empower each other and motivate each other and hold each other accountable. Like, oh, I signed my first contract. Yes, girl, I put in my 2 weeks notice. And I love it. It's amazing. It's a whole mood. And then on top of that, we have our live sessions where they all get access to me on video chat, just in case they have any questions in between, any obstacles in between. We're able to chat everything out. They can get their questions answered in real time and just get the knowledge and insight from a mentor who's been in their shoes, but has also made all of those mistakes so they can avoid them. And even if you jump into travel nursing and it's not perfect, because guess what? It's not going to be. There's no job that's perfect, right? But the difference is it's one thing to run into an obstacle and be stressed out and not know what to do and not know what steps to take. But the nurses enrolled in the travel nurse course, when they do run into an obstacle, they've probably heard of it from me before in one of the lessons, so they know how to deal with it. And if they don't, they have a mentor to turn to. They have a supportive community to turn to ask questions and get the knowledge and insight they need to make an educated decision and not just kind of guess their way through and learn through trial and error. They can make an educated decision and end up on top.
I love what you're saying about this. There's so many good things. First of all, I love that you say learn from my mistakes, because that is one thing that when I was starting my business, I listened to podcasts like constantly. If I wasn't working or sleeping, I was listening to a podcast because I wanted to learn from everybody else's mistakes, because I'm a little older. I'm not 20 something. And so I don't have time to make my own mistakes and then learn from them. I want to learn from somebody else's mistakes so that I don't make them. I'll still make mistakes and I'll still learn from them. But if I can eliminate that, instead of making 10 mistakes, I'm only making 3 mistakes, I feel like I'm ahead of the game. Also, I love what you say about that, community support. I feel like a lot of times the one thing that people are looking for is somebody to hold their hand and kind of just know that I need that safety net. If I have a question, do I have somebody I can ask? And just knowing that you have that safety net allows you to go out and do it. The first contract job I was working in labor and delivery. It was the first. I had been a nurse for several years. I worked in ICU and oncology and hospice and all kinds of other places. And then I finally got to work in labor and delivery, which is what I had wanted to do since before I started even in nursing school. And when I started working there, I had worked there for about 3 or 4 years. And one of my mentors came up to me and she said, "It's time for you to move on." And I was like, hurt. Like, what do you mean? Like, why are you trying to get rid of me? And she's like, "No, you've learned everything you can learn here. We were like a level 2. So we weren't really busy, but she's like, you've learned everything you can learn here and you are better than this and you need to move on." And I was like, so afraid. So afraid. This is how sweet she was. And this is why I love that you have this in there. We did a contract assignment and they needed 2 nurses and in this rural hospital out in the middle of nowhere. And so she actually did the assignment with me. We drove together an hour away. She's like, "I've been to this hospital before. It's okay. The people are nice." I'm like, "I'm so afraid." She actually went with me. I mean, how awesome is that? So, Sarah, that's what you're doing. You're like, "I'm going to hold your hand. I'm going to walk you through this. I'm going to take you step by step. And that's exactly what she did for me. She was like, "Okay, this is where you're going to go. You're going to fill out this form. And then like I said, she drove with me. We went in her car and she drove me to that assignment. And I was so nervous because I had only done labor and delivery at that one place. And so for somebody who wants to travel, but they're so afraid, they're afraid of the unknown. You're taking away the fear of the unknown, but you're doing one step more. You're even saying, "Hey, if there's something that I didn't," and I have a feeling that it's not that you didn't cover it. It's knowing from my own experience with my own courses, sometimes they just need to talk to somebody. They just need somebody to
Absolutely.
say, you're on the right track and you're good. And then once they get that, they're like a rocket. They're just like soaring on and doing great things. They just needed that little bit of confidence, which is, I'm sure, what you give them in your course.
No, like you're definitely right. I feel like there's so much fear and anxiety and overwhelm that's related to travel nursing and just jumping out of your comfort zone in general. That's a scary thing to do. And the travel nurse course really eliminates that. Like I tell people all the time, if that's your fear, if that's it, then that doesn't have to be an excuse. You can enroll in the travel nurse course and your problem solved because I got you. You know what I mean? Like, but it's definitely, and you're so right. My ultimate goal is to empower and educate nurses so that they're able to really excel as a travel nurse and not just, oh, I'm going to jump into travel nursing to make some quick money. Like you can do this long term. You can use it to really advance in your nursing career and really build a life that you want to live. You can use it to become an entrepreneur, and so many nurses in the course, what I love, like their confidence just skyrockets. It just boosts once they realize, like, wait a minute, I got this. They'll say, Sarah, can you review my offer? I'm not sure. I'm like, well, what do you want? What questions do you have? What did you look at? And then after talking to them, I'm like, you realized I just asked you and you knew all the questions, right? You have them. You watched the lesson in the course, you soaked up the information, and now you have the knowledge. And that is like the ultimate goal for me. I don't want them to have to depend on me. When they graduate, they're like, I don't need Sarah to review my contract. I have the knowledge to catch the red flag. You know what I mean? And that's awesome when they're confident enough to say that. Like, I don't need anyone to review my offer, to check my contract, to like, no, I can make that decision. And that's incredible. I love it.
I love that you give them that. And, I can imagine that these recruiters are seeing the brand new first time travelers and they're thinking that they're going to be able to get one over on them. And then Sarah's in the background on their shoulder saying, make sure you do this, make sure. And they're probably like, what, how do you know that? Where is this coming from? Because they're not going to be able to get one over. And I'm sure that they're not purposely trying to get one over, but of course they're doing their job. I think as nurses, we're patient advocates. So we think that we look out for our patients and we expect that everybody's looking out for us. But unfortunately in the business world, that's not the way it is. But the more nurse entrepreneurs that are out there, the more it will become like that because we are different. We don't do it just because we want to make a buck. We do it because there's something more we want to make a change in the world. We want the world to be a better place. And if somebody's going to do it, I say let a nurse do it because we know how to do it and do it right because we take care of our people just like we take care of our patients. So that's why I think every nurse that's even thinking about entrepreneurship, you need to jump into it, do it. It is the best thing ever. And it's just like taking care of your patients, but you're taking care of your customers. And it's so gratifying to see them. I'm sure it's gratifying for you when you see them out there. And I don't know if you've ever got to do a travel assignment with somebody who's been through your course, but I'm sure it would be like an amazing experience.
No, like this is the crazy thing. It's actually happened to me several times. The first time it happened, I was sitting in orientation, starting my contract, and this nurse just comes up to me and she's like, Sarah, that we both just immediately got emotional and started crying because I remember the first time that I talked to her right when she enrolled in the travel nurse course. She was crying. She was upset. She was searching for a job for months. She wasn't working with the right company recruiter. It was a mess, but she was hopeless. She was desperate. She was anxious and she cried and cried. She said, Sarah, I don't know what to do. I said, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Like, we're going to handle it. And she ended up landing her first job, and it ended up being her original job fell through, but it was great because once she enrolled in the travel nurse course, she ended up finding a better job, and it was in a better location. So it was a blessing in disguise. But after that, I didn't hear from her again because she started living her best life. And so a whole year later, I'm sitting in orientation and she's like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, girl, I just finished my vacation in Bali and I got this contract and that. And I'm like, oh my, it was just like incredible. And so I just would have never expected to run into her because she's an ICU nurse. And, as L&D nurses, we're usually isolated. So I just
Yes.
would have never, it was such a coincidence that we both started our orientation that same day. I'm not even going to say coincidence. It was meant for us to like run into each other. So that was incredible. And then my last assignment that I just finished, there was actually 3 nurses who were enrolled in my course on that assignment.
That's
and I didn't
crazy.
know until I got there, and they were like, Sarah.
That is crazy. How awesome is that?
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And 2 of them, no, all 3 of them, it was their first assignment. And so they were just all laughing because they're like, well, I got in the travel nurse course because I really wanted you to hold my hand. And now you're like, it was cool. They were like, my little babies, like if they had any trouble with their delivery, I'm running in there. I'm like, are you okay? Are you okay?
Oh, I love this. This is great. This reminds me again of my mentor, Laura. She was the same way with me, just like, right there for you, making sure you're okay. And I think this is awesome. I'm so glad that you are feeling this need and giving these travelers confidence. And I'm sure even if somebody's a seasoned traveler and I guess seasons isn't the right word, but somebody who's been doing this and doesn't feel like they have the ropes yet, like they know what they're doing and they're finding out that other people are getting better assignments than them, this would probably be a good course for them also, right?
Oh, not even probably. Absolutely. And I get this question all the time because a lot of people assume the traveler's course is just for brand new travelers. But so about half of the nurses inside the travel nurse course right now are actually experienced travel nurses, half and half. And it's because they jumped into travel nursing, whether they did one assignment or they've been traveling for a couple years. They're like, you know what, Sarah, after hearing you talk about reviewing the offer and understanding what's in the offer and understanding the pay breakdown and knowing how to negotiate, I just realized that like, I don't really know what when my recruiter sends me my offer, I don't understand the pay breakdown. I just ask for more money. I'm like, can you give me some more money? And I'm like, well, that's a great place to start. But what if your recruiter says no? Then you have no leverage because you don't understand what you're negotiating, nor do you understand why you're negotiating. And the travel nurse course gives you the knowledge and insight to say what you're negotiating. And if your recruiter says no, you tell them exactly why you need it. And they rarely have a rebuttal because, to be honest with you, they're not used to that. You're backed in a corner and they're like, whoa. Like, how does she know this? And it's so funny. You mentioned earlier how you said, some recruiters are probably like, where did she? Nurses have told me, the recruiter will ask them, who told you this? And they're like, oh, my friend. Well, who's your friend?
You're getting a reputation, Sarah.
It is definitely for experienced travel nurses. If they feel like, you know what, I've been traveling for a couple years, but I'm not landing the job that I want. That's what a lot of experienced travel nurses run into. It's like, I don't have a problem finding a job, but why can't I ever land the job? How in the world, they ask, Sarah, how in the world did you land 15 crisis rate contracts in a row?
Wow.
Like, well, do you think it's coincidence or do you think it's strategy?
Wow.
There's a method to the madness for sure.
Oh, that's awesome. We have touched so much here. And even if you're not interested in traveling, I think this podcast episode, it has so much information. Just you as a person and as a nurse, you've done so much and you are an inspiration. Whether or not somebody wants to travel, your story is an inspiration to other nurses. So, and that's my job here, is to help inspire and equip nurses. And I think you have definitely done that today. So anything final? I think you have a freebie for our nurses out there that might be interested in travel.
Yes. And by the way, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And entrepreneurship and creating the travel nurse course was something that I never really expected. It kind of just, if there was a huge problem, I saw a need and it fell into my lap. But because, to be honest with you, I love labor and delivery so much. And I always said, I don't think I could find anything else that would give me the satisfaction, that would make me this happy. But the one thing that I love I'm not going to say more. The one thing I love more, or one thing I love just as much as taking care of my patients and empowering my patients, when they're in labor and in their most vulnerable moment, like that is just something, a satisfaction you can't get anywhere else. But empowering nurses to live their best life, oh, that's like a whole nother. I love it, love it, love it. So that is actually how I came about the free masterclass. So I do offer a free masterclass. It's about a 1-hour live webinar that I do, and I talk about the secrets that I wish I knew before I jumped into travel nursing. So if you want a taste of what the travel nurse course is like, if you want a taste of what it's like to learn from me and the advice that I give, the masterclass is a super good introduction to what I have to offer. It's completely free, and I'm sure you'll attach the link down. But yeah, definitely tune in. If you're interested in travel nursing, definitely tune into the free masterclass. And definitely the next logical step is to jump into the travel nurse course if you want to avoid those rookie mistakes that can cost you time, money, and frustration. But not only that, join an incredible community of nurses, have the opportunity to learn from a mentor who has the knowledge and insight to really guide you every step of the way.
I love it. And we will definitely have a link in the show notes to that masterclass. It's sarahgaines.com/live masterclass sign up. But we will have a link in the show notes so that you can get to that. And if people would like to take your course or even just look at it, that's at sarahgaines.com. Is that correct?
Yes, so you can contact me at sarahgaines.com. That's where you can get the info about the free masterclass as well as the travel nurse course. And feel free to follow me on Instagram at Sarah_Gaines. I'm giving daily travel nurse tips and inspiration all the time. So if you want to hear about the ups and downs of travel nursing and the struggles, because I keep it real, I don't sugarcoat it. Definitely follow me on Instagram.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. I really appreciate it. And I hope that you've gotten as much out of this as we have, because I know that everybody's probably just like, wow, this is amazing. And definitely follow Sarah on Instagram. I bet she's going to have some cool photos for us to see with all her traveling.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Oh, it's our pleasure. I found Sarah's interview so inspiring. I really enjoyed talking with her, and I could have talked to her for hours. I find it so incredible that she took such a bad situation and rose from the ashes like a phoenix. What she's doing is absolutely incredible. Not only did she find a way out, but she is helping other nurses to find a way out and to do it in the best way possible for them. As you know, I love entrepreneurship. I especially love nurse entrepreneurship. We do it for the right reasons. Okay, don't forget to check out Sarah's masterclass at sarahgaines.com/live-masterclass-sign-up. We'll have that for you in the show notes. Also, make sure you follow her on Instagram at Sarah Gaines. Speaking of which, I just started an Instagram also. I would love it if you would follow me, the Stay-at-Home Nurse. That's a wrap for this week's episode. I look forward to talking with you again next week, and make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Adios from beautiful Puerto Aventuras, Mexico.